Okay, welcome everyone. I'm sure people will continue to come in, but we're going to start. We come together today to mark the tragic 2-year anniversary of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine with two colleagues who will present for us some materials and methods for integrating into Russian language instruction products of popular Russian culture created in response to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Julia Denne is an independent instructor and owner of the By the Onion Sea program. She teaches Russian classes for both high school students, including heritage and bilingual students, and adults in the Chicago area and online. She has also been conducting adult seminars on Russian and world literature, art, history, and culture at the Newberry Library in Chicago for over 15 years. Julia will present an analysis of anti-war visual arts. Denne Gordienko is assistant professor of Russian and Slavic studies at the University of Arizona. Her interests lie in the intersection of Russian and Ukrainian history, culture, and identity. Her recently published monograph, Outlaw Music in Russia, The Rise of an Unlikely Genre, explores a paradoxical quid pro quo synergy among Russian criminal music, the chanson, and Putin's politics. Anastasia has taught a variety of graduate and undergraduate courses at the University of Arizona, covering subjects such as Ukraine, fairy tales, criminal culture, and the Russian language. Anastasia will present analysis of propaganda serving pro-war chanson music. Both presenters aim to equip language instructors with critical lenses and explicit strategies to teach media literacy. The objective is to expand students' cultural perspectives by heightening awareness of wartime culture, developing their ability to interpret images and song lyrics, and sparking interest in civic and social justice. And so I turn it over to Julia Denne.
Thank you. I'll share screen. You see my screen, yeah?
You do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to talk about teaching anti-war art as part of my kind of a curriculum for this year for heritage students. These are high school students, and I'll show a slide who they are. Our second semester is when we decided to concentrate on the anti-war art. And I'm showing you two little works of art that we use. The one on the right is Ukraina nam не враг. That's from the website that I highly, highly recommend to everyone. It's called No Voble in Russian, and I'll talk about it. It is about anonymous street art, anti-war street art in Russia for 2022-23. And the other one is actually today's work that Sasha Braulov, who is in Petersburg right now, did today. He usually has a work a day, and it is an embroidery, and it's very, very small. It's a tiny thing that he usually puts on posts. And in his Instagram, he says, it's in Kolomna, in a place in Petersburg, so people go and try to find it. It's like a treasure hunt in a way. This slide, I just kind of talking about who I'm teaching. So my students are Heritage High School students. They do speak Russian quite well. They are intermediate, mid, sometimes intermediate high level. They usually went for their high school level right now before they went to some church schools on Jewish centers. So they know how to read and write, kind of. Not maybe very good, but they speak fine. They're interested in doing it. They could have stayed in their schools, but they come to me because they know that we are going to do something more interesting. And all my students kind of come voluntarily. We meet around 4 hours a week. Usually on a weekend, we meet maybe 3 hours, and then I meet with them on Zoom an hour to help them when they work on their projects. And the first semester, we were doing contemporary art, and I'm going to show what we were doing a little bit so you understand what kind of vocabulary they have, what do they know about it. And in this particular slide, you should see 2 words that should irritate you enormously. The first is savrisk. That's how in Russia they do call this современное искусство. They don't say современное искусство, they say savrisk. And the second one is продажник. And like my mother said, this word doesn't exist, but that's how they do call in galleries or exhibition people. It's like this young girls usually who sell pieces of art. So they're not gallerists exactly, but they're employees who sell it. So I just also want to include some vocabulary to my students that their parents may not even know, and they love it. They love it. They say, we have продажник. And one student said, oh, my mom said that it's something terrible, that it's like a prostitute. I said, no, it's not that. It's just language changes. It's important for us to kind of realize that. For the first semester, when we were doing contemporary art, the idea, the end of the semester, they learned how to create gallery labels for the works of art they chose. Write letters. For me, it's very important that they do reading and writing. So some of them were writing letters, others were keeping journals. And at the end, we have like an art exhibition with галерист, продажник, коллекционер и случайный посетитель. Случайный посетитель is that бабушка usually that they choose, who doesn't know anything about contemporary art and thinks that it's just nothing. So it's kind of a learning to talk in that, and I'll show some materials we used. Second semester, we are doing, we're learning about pro-war, anti-war art from 2022, and eventually we work with that with street art, we work with the contemporary artists, and the end project is they become curators, yeah, and they collaborate in teams, and I'll show you a little bit more later, creating their own exhibitions. The methodologies that I use, there are 2 really good books about teaching through art. I highly recommend for you to look at them. And I point out some of the things that I find really important. Why art? Because I had to explain it to the parents, and why contemporary art. And contemporary art actually has all of it, what the students need. Because we're expanding through the limit of monolingual understanding of critical thinking. So we do this analysis, evaluation, synthesis with those works. The reason it works so well is that there is no wrong answers or questions. It's kind of interpretation, and the students are coming with their own interpretation, and they're very good at that. I have to say, compared when we present it to the parents cannot come with such fun ideas as the kids could, as the students can. And this cross-disciplinary learning environment and putting it all together is just really working well for them. They get interested in it. And we do have conversations in writing that where they can exchange ideas, and working through journals, letters, and presentations eventually. But so I wanted to get a couple of resources I used for my first semester for contemporary art. This book that I mentioned is a wonderful book. It's like a big art book, but it was published in 2022, so it's fairly recent. It has 17 chapters about different parts of Russia, of artists, not just from Moscow and Petersburg, you can see that, but throughout the country. It also has women's art, street art, conceptual art, digital art, and so on, which will give you quite a good idea. It's like lots of pictures, not a lot of text, but it will give you names. Who are these artists? How we find them? I think that's one of the best resources. The other one, I recommend Anna Tolstova's a series of articles in Kommersant. And it's called «30 лет российского искусства в лицах. Последние новости». She chooses several, she concentrates on specific artists and she writes really well. I do want everybody who teaches Savrisk read it because you will be surprised. It's not like it is you can find in the textbooks about art. Nobody speaks like that. She writes really well how people talk. And I have many more resources, and I will put these two documents in chat today, one on Russian art and the other on Ukrainian art. And please add yourself. It's a lot of resources as well that should help you. This is the books that I used, part of it. Russian through art for intermediate advanced students. It did work for me for my purpose, though I had to supplement it a lot. The wonderful thing about this textbook is it's available online, and it's kind of they create their own Canvas classroom, and all the video recordings are there. So we used that, even the ones that in the paper textbook, they sometimes are kind of there like a conversations, as a dialogues, and we use the chapters on contemporary art. And already in chapter 1, they had современные художественные музеи, галереи. So it did have a vocabulary, some exercises, listening, looking, some videos. So we went through all of that. In chapter 3, there was виды современного искусства. That was very good. They have a wonderful comparison about like уличное искусство, street art versus graffiti, and how what the differences are. So it's a little bit kind of maybe dated in some ways, but the vocabulary is great. So for us was perfect. And as my students learned that we do say graffiti in Russian, I do, but the Russian artists say graffiti. The younger ones, the older ones don't. So it's kind of, again, changes how the language is not static, so which is really fun. And I'll show kind of a little bit more what we learned through that textbook. We learned, is all art made today's contemporary art? It's actually not. Is contemporary art безобразие? It was like from one of the discussions in the book, or innovation. So that creates really cool discussions, and we wrote about it. Materials are collected throughout the whole book because they have sculpture separately. So I added it there because we needed materials for installations, for example. Street art, as I said, ideas and concepts. That was not emphasized as much, but it was when they discussed conceptual art. And I put some of the artists that we covered, but we covered many more. But because of that first book that I showed, we covered a lot of artists from all over the country, and lots of young artists and very funny ones. I put that потенциально неприемлемый content. This is actually an artwork in Nizhny Novgorod. But for me, it is important because lots of this art that I'm going to talk about, I do with high school students. So I have to really see what's appropriate and what's not. Maybe at college level, you don't have such problems, but I do. I had several disclaimers that I did for parents. And sometimes I can give like the whole Instagram account entries to all my students. I have to choose depending on the artist. Some are just fine, but some are not. Some can be too violent, too emotional. This content is difficult, of course. And I put one of these caricatures that we talked about. Какое великолепное произведение. Между прочим, это план противопожарной охраны. And my students actually argued that this plan is very interesting piece of art and how you can use it this way. So they can do that and they have fun with that. So this one is probably most important slide that I have, because when you talk about art, contemporary art in general, you don't need to ask too many questions, but some questions are special, and they have to kind of affect the students when they look at it and make sense to them. And they can be developed on all levels. Like, что я вижу перед собой? Я вижу буквы. Я вижу дом. It doesn't need to be a lot. You can say я вижу инсталляцию, but not necessarily. It just can be very, very simple. Из каких материалов, в какой технике выполнена работа. Also can be very simple, depending what it is, but they do have list of materials and we add it all the time because you can't always put all of them. There was a artist who made a black square out of fur, so we had to add fur. Я мех, меховой черный квадрат. We had that. Где ее можно увидеть? This is particularly important for the site-specific works. And then как целиком можно описать то, что я вижу? Какие идеи? And that idea is what we want to get from them. Then there's a comparison contrast, похоже, не похоже. I put классические, but we usually would compare it with other works we already looked at, rather than классические работы. And then the last one is very important, что я чувствую, когда смотрю на нее, какие эмоции, ассоциации вызывает эта работа. This was important for us because we noticed we react differently. And of course, you can add many more questions compared with its sculpture, installation, or just a painting, yeah. But they do work most of the time, this particular, and you don't need to have a lot of questions, but that's how we look at each particular work, and then you know how to start it. You just like don't stare at it and you don't know what to say. And it's very different from мне нравится, не нравится. Что художник хотел сказать. That's how you probably, those of you know how they taught in Russian schools, they always say, что художник хотел сказать этой работой. We never know. Or we don't care actually what художник wanted to say. Yeah, we just really will look at it now. So I gave this an example of Kirill Kto is a digital artist. He's a street artist as well from Zelenograd. He's abroad now. He immigrated, but все совершенно однозначно. So here we will look why he wrote it this way, why all these letters are different, why they're so bright, why it's important for him, why he makes it kind of does it ungrammatically, yeah, doesn't put it differently. So why is it? And they had so many ideas, so interesting ones. So this is a great artist kind of to do that. But we did it actually with practically every piece of art. We use at least some of these questions. И что я вижу перед собой is a very good one. Because we don't care who did it and when and how famous he was and how much it weighs if we don't really understand the ideas behind it. And that's what makes them talk. So for example, so this is kind of we finished it last semester with this type of works. So we compared the Родина мать зовет. This is this work, and I put a close up because otherwise you can't see it. Look at her face. Because this work actually, Russians Through Art does talk about it, but they talk about like basic information about the architect, not the engineers actually, so it's a very interesting engineering work. But they don't really talk about what do we feel when we look at it. And they don't feel it anything if they look when it's like a small one. But if we look at it very close, they see, oh, her mouth is open. Yeah, it's like, what is that? And then we decided she actually looks that Родина мать зовет. She looks to the east, but her sword is looking to the west. And it kind of makes a huge impression because she asks for people from the east. It's about the Second World War. She wants them to come and defend their country, but the sword is already there. And this mask, we looked at her face, kind of compared with Greek masks, yeah. And it was Arc de Triomphe, Marseillaise in Paris as well. So it's kind of interesting to compare, to look what materials used. It's actually concrete, and the sword, which is metal, is heavier than this the whole 85 meters high statue. That makes them like eye-opening, you know, like that makes them interested in it. We compared it with the contemporary Ржевский мемориal советскому солдату that was opened in 2018 by Putin and Lukashenko and had quite good reviews by some and pretty terrible reviews by others. And right now it's actually used pretty horribly as a kind of another one of these soldiers who has to defend the country. So Putin is using it as a symbol of the war against Ukraine, unfortunately. But even if we look at it straightforward, there are kind of interesting ways of doing it. Is when my student said, why does he have a skirt? Why does the soldier, Stalin's soldier, has a skirt? And it turned out to be cranes. So, and it's connected to Rasul Gamzatov poem and a famous song about cranes. So we listened to that song and compare it to that, but they still didn't buy it because it's just the metaphor of the died soldiers turning into cranes may be good in a poem, but it's not very good in statue. It's like can't really see him turning into a flock of cranes. Yeah, it just doesn't work. It's like things from one period put with like a social realist type of a soldier with those kind of more modernist ideas of cranes just don't work together as well. So that was very interesting one. And we compared it to this wonderful matryoshka created by Vasily Slonov, who was arrested a couple of weeks ago when he tried to enter Kazakhstan. And he is under home arrest right now. This matryoshka he did in 2010. And look at that, he actually stood there till 2023. So it was there for 13 years in Krasnoyarsk. He's from Krasnoyarsk. And they just love this matryoshka, my students. And the questions are asked, because we kind of started, that's our contemporary art, yeah? Почему ржавые пятиметровые матрешки так много заплат? And then I asked them, чувствуете ли вы хоть какую-либо надежду? And I, for example, didn't feel any hope. I don't know about you, but they did. They said, смотрешка, you can open it, and the one inside will be a better one, maybe. You know, so they had like all kinds of different ideas. So that was an interesting one. This matryoshka with no face kind of really probably symbolizes what Russia becoming right now. So it's like a very interesting image. And this semester, we already started like with that anti-war because we kind of prepared. They already have the vocabulary to talk about it. We did need some other vocabulary, and I'll show what I did. And we started with some pro-war groups that I chose, and I showed what they were doing. You know, right in Russia, they don't have a very good pro-war art. Yeah, unlike songs that Anastasia is going to talk about, they don't really have that much. But they do have a lot of ZV type of art that's really, really boring. And students get it. They get it immediately. So I'll show you some of the works they were doing. Then we got to that website of Russian Anonymous Street Art Against War with anonymous art that was all classified. Then we looked, we're actually there now. We're looking at individual artists right now. And finally, they're going to be doing a project, Мы против войны, that they'll present to the teachers and to some of the, we probably will go also to the to their grandparents who live in special like nursery homes. But that's, we didn't decide for sure. And they create their own exhibitions. They can do it digitally. They can do it as a poster. They're debating how to do it. And they will conduct a guided tour in teams, and others will ask questions and they have to answer that. The idea is to combine the works that they choose and not just create their own labels and descriptions, but find ideas to put them together. What does it put them together? What do combine? Why does it choose these particular works? How they're put together? Is there going to be curatorial? So we started compare contrast. This racket we actually did last semester. We looked at it before because it was created 2020. It was created before the war started. But when you connected it with this anonymous art with this Yuri Gagarin, that kind of puts you all kinds of ideas. And this is what this website, Russian Anonymous Street Art Against War, has. I just copied it. Location, message, and so on. And they explain it. Шуточное обращение к Юрию Гагарину. Yeah? Нет войны is all in dots. And they love it. Игрушки протестуют, потому что люди уже не могут. There's a lot of examples like that on that website, so you can use it actually at all levels. They like it, игрушки протестуют. They have like игрушка, some little Lego person holding нет войне. So that could be used quite a lot. The other one we looked about, that's some of the vocabulary I had to give them. We had more about цензура, самоцензура, запрет, донос, and so on. Not the best ones, but we had to do it. And this is actually an example of самоцензура, because the museum actually decided this work by Dmitry Shagin, who is part of Mitsky, a group that started in Petersburg in 1980s, was done long ago. He creates new ones, but with like the same kind of, not copying exactly, but with the same motifs. And they said it's like too political, and Mitsky никого не хотят победить, they just paint it over. And he was really mad, and he took it out. And they gave him explanation, придет какая-нибудь бабушка, напишет письмо в Минкульт, и нам прилетит. They loved that kind of a phrase. So we kind of talked about what exactly, and then they had to research Mitsky because we didn't actually talk about them earlier. But it is самоцензура, yeah? Self-censorship. The museum decided to do it. Nobody told them to do it. The цензура is example. Цензура, we did street art, and we did this «Жить прошлым». Timo Rada did that. That was a good one because he always explains what he's doing. So I put in bold like lots of things that we would talk about. I'll ask questions. There's an interview with him in Medusa. Here, it's here, and another one kind of a closer to. So before they had «Наша цель коммунизм» there in the Soviet times, then they took it out, and there was nothing. And it was actually on the Prospect Космонавтов, which they liked because we already had space as Gagarin. We talked about it, so it was kind of interesting. So I got questions for them, что значит жить в прошлом, почему он выбрал это место, because that's site-specific. Yeah. And почему вы почувствовали, что вы почувствовали бы, если бы жили в одном из этих домов? That's emotional one in the we talked about. There was a discussion in class, and this was their homework. So they had to look at this богатыри. This group, Katyusha, they call themselves женское движение. They're not a движение exactly. They have only 6,000 people signed on their Telegram channel, but not much happening there. I think it's kind of organization that funded by the administration of president. I actually had some interviews, research. I did research with them. I talked to a couple women from there. And what they do is they do lots of things. They make calendars with their own portraits, you know, like for soldiers. They have some other things. They promote now Putin as a president. But in this particular case, they did that graffiti on a building that's actually a building that has a lot of Moscow government offices there. So they were allowed to do it just fine. Following, they're not artists at all, but they were kind of following some patterns. It is just downtown. You see Moscow. It's opposite of Paveletsky's station. And I gave them watch a little video about it. It's just how they work. It was no words, but the comments. The video had only 2 comments. One is just like terrible, and the other one, чуть в аварию не попал, когда увидел это. Первая мысль – 3 придурка. Вторая – мир сошел с ума. You see how the Moscovites reacted to that. So, and of course, it's based on this «Три богатыря» Vaznetsov, and this comparison was a great exercise because of the importance of this «Три богатыря» for Russian culture in general, but you can even, you know, you may dislike them, but at least they have horses, yeah? Without horses, see what happens to them. Yeah, so that was a very good thing they did at home. They were looking, they recorded some of the answers on canvas, and we discussed it. And the second was even a worse work by the same group. This is Пересвет, and you won't believe it how it was done, but I just put it that they went to Mariupol after Mariupol was completely destroyed by the Russian army, and they collected glass. They created that like broken glass from Mariupol, and they created this work out of that, and they took it to the main sorry, they took it to the main cathedral of the military forces in not far from Moscow. It's a horrible creation that was done, and it was we see a photo there, and they put it to Mariupol school, so it's in some school, and based on a work of this Pavel Rezhenko, wasn't a masterpiece at all, but see what happens to it when it becomes this glass, yeah. And there's a little article about that, so they also kind of had the reaction to that, what do we see through that. That was our pro-war art, and I thought it was appropriate to show for students. And then we go to this wonderful website, so Нет Вобли. So this website you would love, though for me it was a little bit too much information. So they have like big articles, both in Russian and in English, done by Alexandra Arkhipova. She's anthropologist and not an art historian. So she actually classified that as from a point of view of anthropology was very interesting to the students. It's a long, it's like a virtual exhibition that had 471 exhibits from 46 places in Russia. And she classified, that's I put the names of the articles she talks about. She has an enormous amount of information about Z and V and censorship and other things, and what happens to people with examples, some examples. And then she classified all this art into these groups. For us, it was a little bit too much, so we didn't use all of them. The one I put with stars is messages, types of messages, and camouflage coded message, for example, that's classified on the basis of the method, yeah, how it's encoded. We just use direct message, coded message, sharing of emotions, we like that, and commemorative as well. I'll show you how it is. Some of them are just works of art. Well, anonymous art that they can see in the streets. Украина нам не враг, for example, direct message. The хотят ли русские войны? This is taken from Yevtushenko, so that's a different category. And this camouflage, for example, this is a work by Sasha Skochelenko, who was arrested for 8 years. And that's what she did that explained in more detail. Some have more explanation. For me, it's too much explanation sometimes, especially in English. But if you just put these images, and you don't necessarily have to show them 471 works or get them directly to the websites. It's overwhelming, at least to my students. So I just chose some of it, and we classified it in many, not as many categories. There's more to that, lots of just «нет войне», «срывание листовки не закроет правду», like meta text, code, выключи телевизор, включи сердце. That's actually has this little person you see. That's what is a lot was in the streets of cities right after the beginning of the war. And this is a more difficult message. This is Odessa. It is about the first, I think, time that Odessa was under bombardment, and the little girl Kira, who was a baby, died with her mother and her grandmother. Was a horrible tragedy. Everybody talked about it, and they put that in for her. So I don't know how I'm doing with time. The rest I have. Let me show very fast about the artists. Now I have slides for like 9 artists. I won't probably go through all of them, but I wanted to show, that's what we're doing now. We started with Pavel Отдельнов, who is immigrated from Russia. and he's in Great Britain now. Again, we talked about the artists that, though some of them are in Russia, lots of them immigrated. Some of them can do nothing. Some do some kvartirnik, like this exhibition in the apartments. 500 artists were fined or arrested in Russia. So like the situation is pretty difficult. Pavel Отдельнов is a very well-known artist. He immigrated, I think, the first days of the war. He has a very interesting art. What is in Anna Tolstova's Kommersant article, you'll see she calls him industrial landscape artist, but he does much more. What's good about that? It's has a video right on his website. It's 15 minutes, and it's not very easy. Even for my students, it was hard to understand. And he talks about how he became an artist. He became a classical artist first, and then how he decided to do the contemporary art. And I put the questions for them to understand. They can't understand every word, but they enough for them to get it, to talk about. And the work of Pavel Отдельнов we looked, and again, this is about his relatives in Mariupol. He put a very kind of a touching and emotional drawings. He doesn't usually do that, but he did it in this case. That's what we looked at. But he has enormous amount of other works. The website is very good. One of the things about artists that I highly recommend is the websites. My students love it. Artists have very good websites. They're very well done and they're beautiful. They actually learn how to make a very good website just from looking at those. This is Slava, it's Patrick, kind of. It's like a nickname for the, I think, Slava Komissarov, his, Stanislav Komissarov, his full name, and artist from, he was born, not Yekaterinburg, is actually a small town in the Urals, but he lived in Yekaterinburg, and he now is in Serbia, and he talks about himself. I just left that in Russia because you see that some of this I can understand pretty easily, at least some of it. And he is had incredibly interesting series of works. I think this one is Montenegro. I think he worked with Marat Geliman, who is in Montenegro, and got some places for the artists to stay. The first work on top, on the right, was done in Petersburg. And the rest is in Montenegro. It's like this black forms. He kind of takes Malevich's suprematist images and put it in old buildings. And I have to say that on slides doesn't look really good, but my students were just absolutely emotional about it because his website is very good and you can share it with them, at least on this series. And he has his buildings, old buildings in Montenegro with all this abandoned buildings, lots of them, and it's just those black squares are just really emotional. And he talks about what he wanted to say. Anna Samoilova is a very young artist. She has a daughter who is maybe 2 years old, and she created her own font. Look at her letters. She did the one Нет войне, that's for the feminist anti-war organization. She did that. You may have seen it. They use her logo. And she, before war, she was interested in feminism and like heritage problems. But after that, she just really changed enormously, and she had wonderful posts just after the killing of Navalny. What she did here on the right, for example, is a bib. It's a vintage bib that she bought in with actually it has English Latin alphabet on it, but she decided to put to embroider the Russian one on top for her daughter, that the daughter has both Russian and English. Very kind of a touching, because lots of these artists do have that problem with immigration, which is very good for my students to talk about because they are very often in the same situation. And that's her visual diary that she did through the war. The series called Polya. She talks how she does it, and that's very, very powerful. The more works into that. Никто не забыт, ничто не забыто, and with a question mark, yeah. So Pavel, Sasha Braulov, I already showed you his work. Remember this embroidery little thing? He has a lot. He started as an artist for architecture avant-garde. You probably like this building here is a Melnikov building house in Moscow, but he did a lot of embroidered avant-garde of the buildings that don't exist anymore, and they're extraordinary, just wonderful done. But after the war, he kind of started working with a series like little children saying something, and they're just very, very powerful. Хватит, Formula Mira, and so on. You kind of interesting because there's a space. He kind of goes back to the Soviet times sometimes, like when he was a child maybe, or growing up, and lots of toys as well. Kids just, my students love this artist, very, yeah. And again, some quotes, so we have to decide where the quote is from, what song it's from, and so on. So it's a kind of interesting. Ася Marakulina, we did a lot of her work throughout the first semester, because this particular thing that's called Moё солнышко is probably their favorite work of art. You would ask my students, they don't say any kind of a богатыри, no, it's going to be солнышко, because they loved it. What you see here, it's actually a mirror. There's a mirror in this sun here, and she worked with the old playgrounds in the Soviet time and like right 90s, when the playgrounds were always red and blue somehow, and she collected all these little things and she put them in a different ways. So this kind of a sun is iron, yeah, so it doesn't really give light to this poor plant. This is eucalyptus that is also kind of a poisonous. There's so many ideas around we had, and because it's a mirror, you see yourself, so you have to take care of this plant in a way. So they just loved it. They had so many ideas about it. But before war, she was interested in nature and the interaction between nature and a person. But after war, she had really kind of powerful work, and lots of them like little plants that just grows next to some kind of a almost like a jail window, yeah. And the one on the bottom here, this is a kind of a little houses that were drowned. So in Ukraine, when this the river went out, remember, it's like what she did for that one as well. Okay, I probably should go very fast. Polina Osipova is an artist from Chuvashia, and she's famous for her work with Gucci. Actually, she did like all kinds of masks, and she was did that anti-war art that she did, like the one on the left. She did in Chuvashian language, in Russian, Ukrainian, and English. Что фраза «нет войны» на нашем родном языке усиливает значение слов. She worked with Alyonушka, that also kind of was very interesting. And she put, if you look here, it's both in Ukrainian and in Russian. And she talked about her friend, Anya, who was in Chernihiv when the war started, and she didn't hear from her for a while. So this is artist from Buryatia, who created this free Buryatia Foundation logo and also had some art in Buryatia. Alisa Gorshenina, you'll see all this art. Here I won't talk about her, but she is also very powerful. We have this word peace in all different languages. And she's like said, there's a mistake somewhere. It's okay, I'll correct it. She's not afraid of that. And this is Мы против войны in different languages. And my last artist is this Kung Fact. He calls himself Kun Fact. I highly recommend him because he works with words. Every day he has some kind of a new work. Some of them maybe don't work for us, but others do. In Art for Думающих, he has a wonderful interview he did to Radio Svoboda, highly recommended. And also in Instagram and stories, he likes to talk. He tells what this means, what happened to him. My students really love his work, and they are very, very powerful. And we can kind of look at, I put some of the ideas. And this is kind of as ideas for the final. This is from the journal of one of my students who put the works she liked, but actually she did have some longer descriptions. She didn't want me to copy it for us. She says bad with mistakes, but that's how they start thinking about their final exhibition. I think that's it. I'm sorry I went too long.
Thank you so much, Julia. You have so much information to share.
And
I
I'll
think
share
that-
these 2 documents. Yeah, that I would love everybody to add if you, have any
And I
ideas.
think at our Teachers Lounge that will follow next Friday, you might return to your final project and talk about how kids your students used all these amazing resources and integrated it into their final project. That would be a great thing to kick off with.
Yes,
Thank
I
you
like
so
it.
much.
Thank you.
Certainly
Let
a
me
wealth
get
of
it out of here.
information.
Okay.
Okay, Anastasia is now going to present on propaganda in chanson music.
Yes, all right. Thank you. Thank you so much for this meeting and for the opportunity to share mine and Yulia's knowledge. Before we even start, I probably need to say that I'm Ukrainian, born in Donetsk, raised in Mariupol, the city that was attacked during the first days of the invasion and is currently under Russian occupation. I'm addressing a challenging topic today, personal challenging for me, difficult as my family and close friends have been directly impacted by the war. In the first weeks of the invasion, a shell hit my parents' apartment, leaving them homeless, and my relatives from the Donbas region endured unimaginable hardship and deprivation from the Russian army actions. Some of my friends are still fighting the Ukrainian army, some already lost their lives in the war. And I appreciate the organizers and attendees for recognizing the significance of this date and actively taking steps to invest not only in our students' language proficiency, but also in their intercultural competence. Unfortunately, we live in such times when merely speaking the language is insufficient for making sense of challenging, confusing, illogical events. And the Russian invasion of Ukraine is one such example. Before I begin, do you see my screen? Can you see my screen? Yeah, okay, good. So just to make sure that everything works. This leads us to the topic of my talk today. My research, initiated a few years before the invasion, centers on Russian criminal culture, particularly music with criminal overtones, the chanson, или русский chanson, and its symbiosis with Putin's politics. I contend that in Russia, the appropriation of this genre by the establishment signifies the criminal nature of the political regime. Therefore, even though today I will be discussing the integration of chanson songs, music that is congruent with Putin's propaganda, into language and cultural curricula, this topic is far from celebrating the culture of the aggressor or the invasion. On the contrary, without equipping our students with an understanding of the complexity of the current social political situation by exposing them to a pluralism of attitudes encompassing both anti-war and pro-war sentiments, we do a disservice to students. This deprives them of developing skills in civic engagement, global learning, intercultural competence, and ethical reasoning. These are several items among the list of the essential learning outcomes for liberal education outlined by the American Association of Colleges and Universities. To conclude my lengthy preamble, I'd like to cite Thomas Garza, who in his 2021 article, Here, There, and Elsewhere, discusses the decolonization of the Russian curriculum. I believe this quote applies to my point as well. Multilingual ability facilitates access to original texts and materials and enables direct interaction with local speakers of the language studied, permitting non-translated, unmediated critical engagement in the language with facts, ideas, and problems. By employing syllabi, methods, and materials informed by critical pedagogy, language and culture courses can become inclusive environments for cross-cultural communication, critical engagement of ideas, and expression of diverse and varied perspectives. Emphasis mine. Characteristics that also support proficiency-oriented and standard-based language instruction. It is evident that we all teach diverse student populations, each with unique needs and right. Therefore, there is no one-size-fits-all activity in the classroom. However, it's also clear that we must engage in discussions about challenging subjects to address our students' anxieties regarding Russia's actions. By using authentic sources, we aim to enhance their media literacy skills and develop their ability to detect and counter propaganda messages, false analogies, false arguments, and so forth. Due to the time constraints of this talk, I opted for a quantity of examples rather than an in-length explanation of the methodology for each of the tasks. But I'm happy to answer your questions today or during the teacher's launch in the week. And I also am sharing a handout with my sources. I view chanson, pro-war song lyrics as providing rich material for exploring the topics of the war through language and culture assignments. Of course, student contextual knowledge is crucial for this task. It's important for students to understand that popular culture, including music, reflects people's values, and the response by Russian musicians has been polarized, with some objecting to the war and others openly supporting it. And here is an incomplete list of such a division for rap, rock, and pop music. I'm not talking about the chanson just yet. And in blue, Ukrainian or Ukrainian-born performers' names, with a notable pro-war exception of Taisia Povali, who lives in Moscow and is quite successful. Despite such apparently divergent responses to the invasion from musicians and performers in various genres, the chanson has displayed remarkable homogeneity, with almost no popular chanson performers objecting to the war, including Ukraine-born Luba Uspenskaya and Lalita Milyavskaya. It would also be useful for students if they knew a little bit about the chanson. This musical genre is a direct offspring of the Soviet criminal song Blatnaya Pesnya. While chanson songs may or may not extol criminals, crime, or criminal values, they nevertheless belong to the realm of the illegal, as a parallel to amoral. What makes the chanson genre's response to the invasion so instructive is the fact that logically a musical genre with criminal prison overtones should be subversive of the regime, as it was the case for the Blatnaya Pesnya in the Soviet Union. However, the Putin administration has established a symbiosis with the chanson, using it to achieve its political goals. Since the 2010s, prior to the invasion of Ukraine, chanson stars, in addition to constantly endorsing Putin, have actively championed his politics, from the gay propaganda law to the annexation of Crimea. What's more, both the chanson and Putin's propaganda actively engage with the same Russian nation-building mythology by referring, and I have a list, referring Russia's heroic past, patriotism, exalted mission, military might, and Sobornost. And since February 2022, the theme of war in Ukraine as a holy war against evil, as well as an equation of Soviet-Russian participation in World War II with the ongoing Russian army's actions in Ukraine, has joined the array of propaganda narratives and also infiltrated the chanson. Chanson stars' interviews and social media posts serve as an endless source of such background information for us and for students, of course. Some examples. For instance, Stas Mikhailov, just a week after the beginning of the invasion, declared, "Russia is liberating our brothers from so-called people who can't govern it Ukraine. At the moment, we must unite and support our president because virtually all of the progressive West has declared war on him and consequently on each of us. In fact, such a justification of Putin's imperial move repeats almost literally the Russian president's rationale for the invasion outlined in his address to the nation in February 2022. In perfect alignment with Putin's explanation, in his May 2022 interview, Alexander Rosenbaum, another Russian engineer, very successful within the genre, attributes responsibility for the war to Ukrainians because they grew up in the environment of Russophobia and don't know what Russia is, and that we Russians are kind, hospitable, and not militant, but peace-loving. The chancelier also emphasized that the war epitomized the conflict between the light and the dark forces, with Russia as the former and predestined, of course, to win because, sorry, I need to switch the slide. Okay, because it has always been this way. Russia has always brought good and liberation. Meanwhile, Vika Tsyganova, who is the main focus of my talk today, became one of the most ardent advocates for Russia's offensive against Ukraine. It took her less than a week after the invasion start to compile an open letter to Putin. For her, Russia is not an aggressor, but a savior of its people and also the world. For her, the invasion of Ukraine is God's will, a holy war in which the great, and this is the post, it's quite lengthy, the great triune Rus is resurrected. And Tsyganova concludes, we are Russians, and therefore God is with us. Великая Триединая Русь, мы русские, с нами Бог. It could be for students who are at advanced level of Russian, it would be a good exercise to make them read this post and actually mark all grammatical mistakes in it, because there are plenty. Tsiganova's 2023 song Чебурашка, все будет как надо, everything will be as it should, while conveying the familiar religious, homophobic, nationalist themes, exhibits an open hatred to the West. Dashin boasts about Russia's nuclear power and a promise to send the enemy to hell. And I'm not even talking about those students who were learning language using Чебурашка materials, the cartoon animated film materials. It would be very interesting for them to discuss the engagement with this cartoon character on a totally different political level. All this appears against the backdrop of a parallel between the Mother of God and Mother Russia, emphasizing the holy mission that, in its ongoing offense on Ukraine and in symbolic opposition to the West, makes Russian victory simply inevitable. Tsyganova is not shy in her expressions. She calls those not fond of Russia упыри, devils in Slavic folklore, thus clearly associating them with unclean forces and evoking the image of Russia's enemies sucking blood from their victims. Next come the rattling of nuclear weapons and reference to Mother Russia as a holy land protected by Mother Mary. This heavenly safeguard logically forces all the dark forces back to hell, even if by nuclear strike. And this is unfortunately the only part of the lyrics that I'm going to show you because of the time constraints. But let's read together. What's up, reptilians? Are you suddenly sad? It's long since you swallowed nuclear dust. So come in, the awesome nuclear mushrooms Mother Russia will fetch them from the cellar. But I strongly advise you to listen to the song because it's an endless source of inspiration for us teachers. The music video to this song is as bizarre as its text. That's why I love this piece so much, because you can work with the lyrics, you can work with the video. While it predictably entails some footage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, as the song progresses, the key concepts mentioned in the lyrics are supplemented with their signifiers. For instance, the video clarifies which girls, упыри, Tsyganova refers to as photos of presidents of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, US President Joe Biden, and the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, illustrate this reference. To be quickly replaced by the NATO symbol, morphing into a swastika. So you can see the progression. It's a little bit better in the video, but you got the idea. Curiously enough, the reptiloids, are personified with a picture of the US Vice President Kamala Harris, which merges with the image of Gollum from the film The Lord of the Rings. And this video is rich with references to popular culture. In addition to The Lord of the Rings, it borrowed some footage from the computer games Diabola and Doom, something that your students should be able to instantly identify, and also from the films Avengers, Hellboy, and Top Gun. And Mother Russia, Mama Россия, Родина Мать, the concept that Yulia also talked about already. In the video is represented by the instantly recognizable figure of the mother from the 1941 poster by Irakli Taidze, Motherland Mother Call, Rodina Mать Зовет, used in the video interchangeably with the image of a crying Russian mother. Therefore, if your students are aware of the importance of the Rodina Mать concept, this song provides a space for a discussion of how powerful concepts can be used to serve propaganda in justifying an authoritarian regime's decisions, including the ongoing invasion. Another song that would be useful in this connection is the new piece by Putin's favorite, a chanson star of the highest caliber, Grigory Lep's Motherland Mother, Rodina Mать. The lyrics was, by the way, partly written by Alexander Rosenbaum, and I have no time to talk about this song, but it's also quite revealing. To mention just one more song that I would highly recommend for examining the relationship between music and propaganda, popular chansonnier Denis Maidanov, who is also a member of Putin's United Russia Party, a deputy of the Russian State Duma, a frequent participant of governmental pro-war events, and since 2021, first deputy chairman of the State Duma Committee on Culture, wrote the music to the lyrics by former head of Roscosmos, Dmitry Rogozin, and on the Strategic Missiles Forces Day, December 17, 2022, issued the song Sarmatushka. I have no time to deal with the lyrics, which is quite outrageous, but also very interesting, and I have no time to talk about this song's abundance of visual cues that call for interpretation, and it's very simple, as I already said, easy to comprehend for students, but also terrifying lyrics as it calls for a nuclear strike on the US. But I will show you a couple of screenshots from the video so you could get the picture what kind of work it is and what you could work with students on regarding this video. Of course, this is the Sarmat missile, the Pusk, the launch button, the red button, and Maidanov watching Putin's interview, and this one as well. So how can these resources be utilized in the classroom beyond the obvious point of working with the lyrics, translating, analyzing the text, reflecting on word choice, noting slang, colloquialisms, etc. Here, I would like to refer to Bloom's taxonomy, which classifies educational learning objectives according to their levels of complexity and specificity. And I don't assume that anyone never saw this taxonomy. I'm sure that everyone knows that. Various tasks on the lower level of the taxonomy require students to retain and recall information. Many tasks aiming to enhance students' intercultural competence would require them to operate at least at the understand level or higher. Here are several possible themes to consider in developing students' understanding of the topic, the invasion, and their intercultural knowledge through experiential learning. The above-mentioned chanson offers such rich textual and audiovisual material that they can engender a variety of activities, from a 5-minute discussion, reflection papers, collaborative online activities conducted via Flipgrid or Flipgrid or Padlet or another online medium, to even a final project. And such final project could be a creative response to this song, a research project on the accuracy of historical or political concepts, or even a reply to the author of this song or music video. It all depends on the size of the classes and the level of proficiency of our students. Here's the list of the questions, topics to consider as potential themes for our or your or mine assignments, and I have them in the English language. What are the main messages in on? Answer with these questions be at the level understand and apply of Bloom's taxonomy. In what ways does this song protest against or support the Russian invasion of Ukraine? This would involve the analyze level, so we're going up. Then number 3, find the specific lines in the lyrics of this song that convey or refer to the following values or messages, and here are the pillars of the Russian propaganda messages listed. Who is the intended audience for this song? In your opinion, what political beliefs and values does this audience have? And number 3 and number 4 require students' engagement on the levels of analyze and evaluate already. Number 5, analysis of the visual text. This is something that I love when students do, and students apparently love these activities. What symbols and codified messages are you able to detect in this music video? What meaning do they convey? And this would be evaluate and sometimes create level depending on the essence of the student reply. And number 6, compose a reply to Vika Tsiganova detailing the impact her songs had on you. You may find it beneficial to contemplate on the following questions. How did this song evoke emotions in you? What thoughts did it provoke? What historical allusions does this song incorporate? Are they deemed accurate? And does the precision of historical portrayal hold significance in a song? And this is from this slide. Number 7, what is the intended emotional impact of this song? What creative techniques does it employ to achieve this objective? As you listen to the song or read its lyrics, what emotions did you experience? What images came to your mind? And the final one, how does this song incorporate references to popular Western culture and American politics? In what way does this music video utilize these virtual cues in tandem with the accompanying lyrics to either amplify or juxtapose the message? These assignments not only enhance students' intercultural knowledge, but also enable them to comprehend the intricacies of Russia's political and cultural landscape, encourage ethical reasoning, foster a sense of justice, and contribute to the development of them as well-rounded global citizens. And of course, since we inhabit a rapidly evolving world where a significant part of culture tends to be reactionary, this dynamic setting provides compelling case for study possibilities for our students. And here I'm switching from the chanson to popular music in general. For instance, you likely are familiar with Shaman's "Я русский" song, I'm Russian. Semyon Slipakov responded to this song in his "Не русский," right, song, not Russian, in which he deconstructs shamans and Putin's pro-war rhetoric, and that would be an interesting case to have students contrast and compare these two songs and their devices and messages. Or a noteworthy recent event in the reaction of Ukrainian songwriter and performer Irina Bilyk. Just a week ago, while we were at a conference, actually, the Russian singer Philipp Kirkorov performed her song "Снег" in the Russian-occupied Gorlovka in the Donbas region to injured Russian soldiers. And this is the screenshot from Irina Bilyk's reply, which I did not have time to translate, but and I have the link in my handout to this reply. I need to note that this post also contains a quite heartbreaking video footage, so you should be mindful about showing it to student or not. But A pertinent question to pose to my students in relation to this post would be, how does the author's condemnation of Kirkorov's actions contribute to our comprehension to the artist's responses to the war? In addition, Bilik's poem provides rich content for analysis. From its creative engagement with the title of the song Snow, Снег, but she has here Снег в крови у твоих дверей to elicit an emotional response, to the fact that this rhymed piece is crafted in the same verse as the song, the original song, making it easily adaptable to the song's melody. One of Okay, and I will stop here. To conclude, what makes chanson music particularly suitable for teaching about the complex topics of politics and war is the notable absence of chanson performance objecting to the war. In addition, chanson songs are easy to comprehend as they contain simple language, and their alignment with Putin's narrative makes them a textbook example of state propaganda. That's it. Thank you. This is the list of well-known performers who supported the invasion. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Anastasia. That was fabulous. So many resources, on so many different perspectives. I'm wondering, I'm not seeing that anyone, but yes, let's give a round of applause and pause for that before we move into questions. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. I'm wondering if there are any questions from the audience. Feel free to just raise your electronic hand, turn on your video, and you could speak. Olga Klimova.
Yes, hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Yulia. Thank you so much, Anastasia, for wonderful webinar. It was so informative, so useful, and so overwhelming because there are so many resources that I can see we can use in the classroom. My question was about the audience because, and I think that maybe, Yulia, this might be even more relevant to your environment, right? Because you said that you're teaching heritage speakers. So what if you have students in your classroom that have both Ukrainian and Russian heritage, right? Speakers, and maybe Anastasia, maybe you also have these students in your classroom. How do you deal with these kind of, when it is just American students who grew up in the United States, they have parents, maybe, I don't know, from Ireland or I don't know, somewhere else, but it's at least this part of the world is very mysterious to them, and that's why it's easier. I think it is a little bit easier to teach them this because it's new, it's different. But then you have students who are coming from Ukrainian families and Russian-speaking families and from Russia. And how do you work with them, knowing that their parents might have specific political views, right? And what the political views are might not be corresponding to what you are doing in your classroom, right? So it just kind of like they might consider it to be more a little bit provocative, and like, how do you prepare this? Do you have a conversation with your students about this? So how do you deal with potential crisis in your classroom? Because someone can come and say, why did you trash Russia? Right, showing this, I don't know, some anti-Russia songs. My parents like really like pro-Russia, and I don't know, maybe even pro-regime. Who knows, right? Especially with, I'm wondering, with the minors, right, Yulia, with the high school students, not with college students.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. It is relevant, of course. What I'm doing is, and I have students whose one parent is from Ukraine, the other from Russia. I have lots of students who's from Belarus or from Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, not as many, but Kazakhstan somehow a lot. What we're doing, especially, well, we started kind of looking at that right from February 2022. So these students are kind of prepared because we didn't do it directly before. We but we contacted a family in Kharkiv, who's one of the students, actually grandmother was there. And we would call her and talk to her, and all the students were there. It just made a huge impact the first months of the war. She was, all her kind of neighbors left, and she was taking care of several like animals. Some cats were there, some plants. She collected plants, and she was showing us every time, this plant is doing okay, this one's not. Like, it was important for her as well. So I think that kind of prepared us for this type of instruction. This year, when I decided to do this through art, and I can't say that parents really kind of were very happy about it, but they could see how much the students react, how they like it, compared to this church schools that they had before, where they had to really go. Yeah. And one thing that I did, and I think we have to do, is to teach the Russian art, or art coming from Russian artists, whether in Russia or the ones that immigrated separately. So we are going to do Ukrainian art separately completely, because it's actually impossible even to compare what happened in Ukraine, how they react. They have completely different opinions. They have to reflect the tragedy that's happening. They have to bring that message to abroad, and they are incredible Ukrainian artists working. I think I understand there may be more people live in Russia, but I have to say that Ukrainian artists nowadays, they are just quality-wise, even with it, aesthetically, lots of them are incredibly. And we are going to do it separately. The parents know about it, and they kind of agreed for us to do it this way. Yes, maybe not all of them support it. I don't have like conversation with parents exactly, though I do have a sign on my house like that stops the war and all kinds of things, that they know my position at least. And I have it everywhere. But it is changing, because kids, the students reflect that. I remember when Nadezhdin was collecting some signatures for anti-war, one of the families was from Lipetsk region, and the girl actually found out that her mother has a citizenship in that Lipetsk region, and they don't have enough signatures. So she found in Chicago where her mother can go and leave her signature for that Nadezhdin. And the mother, who never cared about any of that, did go and do it for her daughter. So I thought it was kind of a cool. The girl contacted me, and we looked together, and she said, I'll tell mom to go and please support me. And I supported her, just to give an example. Yeah, thank you.
If I may quickly add to the discussion. So yes, with older students, parental problems are not that much present, but also in my classes, technically I keep my own personal position to myself, and there are no wrong answers to the questions I ask them. And students, I think they do have they're very perceptive to popular culture. They approach it with most enthusiasm. I think it's the most probably useful medium to engage with in teaching, but also they have an acute sense of what's right, what's wrong. I, of course, but my personal history presents speaks for itself. Let's say that. But also, I never teach anti-Russian material. Actually, those songs are very much pro-Russian. They're nationalistic. What I hope my students are able to get from being exposed to these controversial from the standpoint of the 21st century humanity material, that the regime, even though it might be supported by some of the population, does not represent the whole population, and especially the political connection of the chanson with the authorities manifests to the biased representation of concepts in this music. So that, and I think that they get the message and they're able to operate, operate with it, reflect on it, and draw conclusions.
Thank you. Alexandra Shapiro.
So first of all, thank you both for absolutely inspirational presentations. And the question I had, I think, is more for Anastasia. You show a lot of very, I mean, depressing is put it mildly, material in your class, right? Something that first I think would have driven me crazy if I constantly kept showing that to my students. Do you balance it out in any way? Because with Julia's materials, if we look at them, we see that, yes, a lot of them are depressing, and all of them take us to that mental space where we think about the war and all the atrocities that are happening there. But at the same time, some of the artists choose to do something that looks very positive and still uplifting even at these times of wars. How do you deal with such difficult and heavy material all the time?
Okay, first of all, of course, I have a content warning message, because even the footage, even the music videos, it does involve the footage of the war with actual battles there. But also, yes, I do balance it out. And we do talk in my courses not only about this side of Russian culture, we talk about anti-Russian, anti-war Russian songs, or about Ukrainian artists. And I think it would be a good idea if I made a compilation of Ukrainian artist resources as well to share for the next week meeting. But also, and I did not have the time to present it in full. The interesting thing which students are able to comprehend and enjoy about these songs is the chanson songs, especially those that I referred to today, is that they are hilarious in a way. They are hilarious in their absurdity, in their blunt distortion of the reality. So students find enthusiastically find these songs a suitable medium to deconstruct messages, and they also find messages funny because they are for well-educated people, and they thoroughly enjoy despite the message, the main message of the song. So this is actually a very useful, I think, in their cognitive development exercises that allow them not only to get the main message, but also to counter message the message, and perceive the main message as a joke because it does not make sense, but you need to understand why it is so. Yeah, so there is a space for humor, there is space for hope even within these songs. Thank you for your for your question.
I would like to add to what Anastasia was saying when you said about counter message. This is exactly how Alexandra Arkhipova actually worked with that website, Novoblia. And this is something that I thought was confusing, but the students found just mesmerizing. They loved it. All these counter messages, because it's like deciphering. And again, and it's learning this cultural knowledge. Like we need to learn that there's Swan Lake means that somebody dies, because there's a lot of that, or the quotes and so on. But altogether, yeah, it just helps them kind of. They really. I was surprised that they like to classify everything. I said, we don't need to classify. And they said, no, we want to do it. We classify everything into the sketch. I think it kind of helps them. And then when they put it together for maybe exactly for developing the analytical skills and synthesizing the material together, it makes a lot of sense for them. Yeah, thank you.
You know, both of you have spoken to something that I feel in the classroom too, is that, you know, when I come across these materials, they're significantly more emotional for me because you understand how destructive they are on people's psyche and power and the creation of cultural mentality. My students get really engaged in the intellectual activity of the analysis. And so they love the fact that they can decode the cultural semiotics of something and understand, and they become less depressed with the negativity. And I've also found that it has helped them develop some empathy for Russians, understanding that this is the propaganda. Like they understand the power of popular culture representations to, you know, even you look at the US, the polarity in this country, right? And so that's something that we're talking about and they're talking about in other classes is the power that important people have, even in a culture where there is free speech. But there's significant messages from important people that change the way groups of people think. And so to think of that on the, like, you know, the degree to which that exists in Russia and the difficulty, you know, in finding other sources of information unless you know, read in English and go through the internet and other sources. I mean, I think it can help develop a sense of empathy, but also just a really deep understanding. And then sometimes I feel like I need to bring them to a place where it's really disturbing. So I haven't had that sense that they feel kind of disgusted about studying Russian. At least I haven't had that. I have one question for Anastasia. And that is, I love the questions you asked. I'm wondering if you have those in Russian on a handout that you would be willing to share.
Sure, I will.
They're great questions.
Absolutely. Sure. And also I need to say that Vika Tsiganova's music video is available in Vkontakte only, which is not accessible without a VPN, but I do have it downloaded. I might, if it's appropriate, I can put it on my drive so teachers could download it from my account and use it in their classes, because it's a pain to download anything from Vkontakte, especially using VPN.
Are there other questions?
I wanted to add about this emotionality, what Lee was talking about. In Russia, kids read that Turgenev's Mumu in like 5th grade, and they still do it. I was always surprised. And that's when the dog is being kind of drowned. And everybody cries, and it's supposed to bring an emotional response. So that's what my strategy to talk to parents was, to answering Sasha maybe question was also say, well, what we don't do Mumu, but it's kind of a similar, because emotional response is very important. And they do agree with that when you kind of get examples that make sense to them. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify. I do agree that emotional content here, especially when we deal with this topic, is crucial. It was just a question of the amount of that emotional and kind of one note. But I do agree that there is humor there, and I'm glad to hear that students can approach these particular songs with a sense of humor. I was happy to hear that. Thank you.
Okay, well, I would like to invite everyone next Friday at 5:30, from 5:30 to 6:30, to come to a teacher's lounge. And just as a reminder, a teacher's lounge is a place for everyone to share. So Julia and Anastasia will be there and can answer any more questions that you have, can share more materials in terms of particularly a representation in the classroom activities, but everyone is welcome to bring anything. I think some of us are struggling with 2 years in, how do you keep doing this, and what do you highlight? And yet also the struggle of, we don't want our students to not know that this is happening either, especially 2 years in. And so the more that people have to share, even quick little things that you do in the classroom, I think that would be helpful for all of us. Okay, well, thank you very much and good evening. Enjoy your Friday night. Bye-bye.